In this video, you'll see some tutors and a tutor trainer discuss the strategy responding to writing and practice the strategy using a piece of a learner's writing. As part of responding to writing, they'll analyze the learner's writing and consider how to best practice grammar, spelling, and other mechanical writing skills with their learners. When responding to writing, ask a writer to read their work out loud. This provides them a chance to catch errors and for you to sidestep reading someone else's handwriting. Always respond positively. Point to something specific that you like in the text and say why you like it. Focus on ideas. Ask a question to find out more. And make one suggestion based on a pattern of errors to focus on skills like spelling or sentence structure.
Thank you for being here, because what we can do today is we can have a little bit of a tutor roundtable, and the main topics are going to be this. How do you respond to writing? When adult learners write in our lessons with us, what's the first thing you do? What's the second thing? So we're going to be working on a strategy to how to respond to writing in a way that elicits more writing and creates more good feelings and more impetus to want to write more. And then the second thing is we're going to focus in on how do we actually help our writers, because we're all writers, how do we help adult learners improve their writing over time? And so we're going to get to a question of correction, because I think that a lot of tutors and teachers automatically move to correction. And we're going to take a different tack about that today. Okay. And we're going to talk about focusing on what can help the most to really practice and really own, so that adult learners progress over time. And what's wonderful about writing is we can see that progress on the paper over time. So that's just a little note to always date your paper, okay? We're going to really learn some strategies, how to respond to adult learners' writing. When you hear strategy, what do you think of?
It's a method.
Okay. Anything to add on? Method? You, Gail, or Sandy?
A method of doing things, a particular way of doing things.
Okay, nice.
And the word strategy means plan.
All right, so plan.
Okay. What you're going to, how you're going to get what you want. How are you going to do what you want?
Good.
What you want to have.
Okay, so how are you going to get there? How are you going to do it? And so the word method and the word plan, and then something that caught my ear is saying again and again, and just the repetition that I think is inherent in learning and in adult learning. And so we're going to be looking at a strategy that's first step, second step, third step. And we're going to be learning and practicing that strategy not only to learn ourselves, but to make explicit so that we can share the strategy with our learners, and then they become the experts at that strategy. And then guess what? They become their own best tutors over time. And so that's the value of a strategy, is it's actually something you can point to and do again and again until you internalize it. So we'll be doing a strategy for responding to writing. And I want to just point out that this is one piece of a process, process writing, which I know that we've worked on before and looked at. So we're going to be looking at a piece of learners' writing today that's been through the pre-writing cycle of writing. It's been through a first draft. It's been responded to. It's been back. It's been revised. And it kind of has been in this whirlpool of going from drafting to responding to revising, drafting, responding to revising. And a piece of writing can really circle around this whole writing process a number of times. It can also just stop here, because it doesn't have the passion or the energy or interest for the learner, and you just move on to something else. So a lot of pieces of writing never get to this publishing phase where we share it with somebody else, and that's okay. What I'd like to do is just outline to you what the strategy is, and then we're going to practice it, okay? So it's quite specific. The first thing we do when a learner, let's say we've been writing together in our lessons, your learner, it's time to share. So what you do is you put the piece of writing in between you, so it's laid out so both of you can see the same sheet of paper, okay? And the first step is this. The person who wrote it reads it out loud. Why do you suppose that is? Why would you want someone to read their own piece first?
I think it's an opportunity for that person to reflect and think about what they wrote, and it brings to life what they wrote.
Okay. How does it bring it to life?
Just the way they read it, the words that they've put on paper, they bring to life by reading it out loud. It makes it their own. It's not somebody else's work they're reading their own work. There's a sense of ownership and pride.
I love that. Yeah. Would you like to add anything on to that?
Well, I would take that a step further and say that they're more familiar with the story than you would be, and so they could put in intonation and emotion where they would want it, where they would want you to feel it.
Wow. Boy, so
emphasis on certain parts.
Oh, I think that's lovely because, it's their story.
Right.
And,
That's right.
Oh, you couldn't have responded better because I love that. And it's very important. And it's kind of profound that you're bringing something on paper to life the way you want it to. And sometimes what's involved in that is something that we all do. It's like, oh, I forgot that word. And you realize, right?
Yes, and they also get a chance to edit their own work.
Yeah.
I misspelled that word.
Right, right. And you're not accountable for every single thing you put first. And so it goes to show like, oh, it's yours. Oh, let's just add that in.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention something else about having a person read their own work. And this is from a person whose handwriting you might not call stellar. And that's me. You actually don't really want to have to sift through somebody else's words on the page, right?
Right.
And I'm doing, we've just got to watch ourselves and we've got to try. And so the way we do it is, we're asking our learners to write in print, uppercase, lowercase, and that's how as tutors we're going to write as well. So hopefully it's more and more legible all the time. But I think those are the most important points. It's your learner's story to bring to life in their voice with their emphases and intonation. It's a chance to kind of edit the first round and read it out loud and see how it sounds versus what they thought they might have put. And it's also a chance for us to let them read the work and us not have to read the work too. So it's a chance for us to hear. Yeah.
And also I think that when you encourage them to read their own writing, and they can see that you get it, and they see where their, penmanship or editing is could be improved, they learn faster, and it gives them more encouragement to read more, write more.
I like
that's
it.
a very good point because I think you become better writers the more you read. So yes. Reading your own work,
and they get
learning
excited.
From your own work.
They get excited. If I write this, oh my goodness, my tutor will like this, or my tutor will be impressed with this. I can't wait to share this.
Oh my gosh! So you guys, I just want you to be my tutors because it's like, all those things, and it's going to be shared, and it's a beautiful segue into what I'd like to say. The first point is after we look at it together. What we want is our learners to know that the very first response that they get when they share their writing with us is absolutely positive.
Yeah.
And it's a place where you share and you make that environment as friendly and as peer-oriented as possible, because you're also going to share your writing, okay? So the next step, we place it in between us so we can see. We ask the writer to read their piece first. The second point is you can take your finger and you point to the writing and you say specifically what you liked about the piece and specifically this piece here, and you say why you liked it, okay? People need to know what's good about their work. Just as much as a person might want to correct someone's work, it's like you need to know what's going well in your writing.
Yes.
And it's also not a general like, oh, that's great, good work, good. It's more like, I like this because, and you're pointing to something, okay? So that's going to be something that your learner expects after time. And it's also going to be when they read their own work, they can start by looking at what they liked and did well. So it's as they absorb what the process is, what this strategy is, okay? So that's the next step. And then the next step is this. It's a question. And the question has to do with what they've written, the story, the content, the ideas, okay? You want to ask a question that will expand the writing. Okay, you can ask questions to clarify the writing as well, but you want to ask a question that will give them a clue, like what comes next in a story. When a listener hears your story, what kind of responses are they looking for next? And, it kind of teaches the shape of a story. A lot of times that's a culturally bound type of things, and so you're this person who might have a question that maybe your learner hadn't thought of even including, but actually it makes really good sense in that story to your casual listener, okay? And it's all about the content of the piece, because we want to show a learner and demonstrate that we're trafficking in ideas, we're trafficking in sharing thoughts on the page, having a good time, but just really taking seriously what someone is thinking and putting on the page.
I think one way to do that is to, when you've read that writing, you can say, when I read this, I visualize such and such. This is what I visualize.
Okay.
This is what you've painted for me in your writing. This is the picture I see in my mind. Is that what you had in mind? Is that what you were trying to do? And if yes, the person's going to get really excited and say, exactly. That's exactly what I was trying to write. And that's exactly what I wanted you to see and understand. Or they may go in the opposite direction and say, oh, no, not at all. Let me change that because that's not what my intent was. That's not where I wanted the reader to go.
Beautiful.
So,
and I like that too, because it's not like any one of us is, the arbiter or the judge to say what works and what doesn't work. It's like, so I think that's a really nice way of phrasing a question. And I have some suggestions too to add on to that. So what do we have so far for our strategy? We've got sharing the piece. We've got pointing specifically to one thing that we like, saying why we liked it. We've got asking a question to clarify the story or to find out more, that what's going to help us write some more, okay? And that's where I'd like to stop right now, because those are the steps you're going to work with. You're going to teach your learner that as well. And then I'm going to show you another step in a minute that's all about a question that tutors have about how to correct a learner's writing. So far, we've only talked about ideas. We've only talked about questions. And the questions we ask probably generate some wonderful conversation. And so I think that when we're writing, something we find out is that our conversation moves from the page to our voices, back to the page, back to human interaction. That can be a model. And we haven't told them anything like that's wrong about their piece or what they need to do to make it better yet. We've only really connected as peers and as writers and as readers. And so that's beautiful. And if that's as far as your lesson goes for one session, then it's well spent time. have with me a piece of writing that I had worked on with an adult learner, and I think it's helpful to actually see what it is we're talking about. And
Thank you.
something that I love about this piece is if we take a look at process writing, for example, when Walter and I were working on this, we spent a lot of time pre-writing in the form of a conversation about a book that we read. And it was easy to read, but it was made for adults, and it was interesting to read. And one of the takeaways from the story was this character who fell in love at first sight. You know, this is adult education. You know, we're talking about love at first sight. So I want to ask you, who at this table believes in love at first sight? Raise your hand high.
Yes.
We do. And, you know, I think people either do or they don't. And you run into both.
Never happened to me, but, you know,
I believe in it.
I've seen it happen. I've heard of it happening.
Okay.
So it must happen.
It must happen. Well, I'll tell you, we're going to read a story about love at first sight that did happen.
All right.
Wow.
And this is a story by Walter. We have a strategy list right in front of us of responding to writing, steps 1, 2, 3, 4. And since Walter isn't here, basically what we're going to do is we each have a copy. What I read to you was actually published because it was published in a book of learner writings in New York City, just because it was from a foundation that would fund adult learning all over the country. And so he is a published writer. And then when we flip our page over, actually let's play a little game here. I'd love for you to take this sheet here, and we're going to flip it over, and then you get to see Walter's handwriting and how he wrote this the first time, what it looks like.
Oh.
And I'm curious, go ahead and turn to this page here. I'm curious what strikes you about Walter's writing. What do you notice?
His writing looks like mine.
Okay, in what
Or
way?
his printing looks like mine.
Okay,
Kind of struggling.
okay. A little bit of struggle in that handwriting. Any other?
Yeah, with this type of handwritten expression.
Okay.
He's got cross-outs and dates.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's easy to read.
Okay.
It's easy to read his writing. It's clear.
I like the way he lines it, he indents.
Yes.
He
lines
really
up
does
his-
a good job at indenting, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And what do you think makes it easy to read, Sandeep?
Just the spacing. His letters are really clear. You know,
Yeah.
it's not cursive.
Yeah.
So it's clear and easy to read.
Uh-huh.
He doesn't have a lot of words on one line. He's not squeezing a lot of words close together. It's
Okay.
very nicely spaced.
Okay, he's
And
doing
the-
that well.
Yes, so I feel like he's got just the right number of words on each line, and
Okay.
and the paragraphs are really easy on the eyes.
All right.
Easy on the eyes to read.
Okay. Well, you know, I appreciate what the two of you have to say right away because it's just very, you know, we're just noticing more and more, and so those are great things to pay attention to all these details. And what I would like to ask you to do is let's take a look at our strategy. We don't have Walter here to ask him to read the story, so we're going to skip that one. I wish we did. I wish you were like a guest coming right in to surprise us now. Wouldn't that be great? So what we're going to do is instead of having him read it to us, but I'd love for you just to read through. Go ahead and flip back to the published draft here, the final draft. And I'd like for you to read it to yourself. And then when you're finished reading it, I'd like to see you take your finger and point to something in the text that you like, and we'll see if we can find one thing that we genuinely really like, and then we're going to say what we like about it. Okay, so let's
right.
practice that first step. Go ahead and point to what you like. so we were all pointing to something. There's lots of good stuff in here. Sandeep, what did you point to? What do you like and why do you like it?
I like the sentence where he describes, he gives context to the characters in his story.
Okay, what did he write?
He described, Stephanie was visiting my sister because my sister was married to her brother.
Okay.
So he lets us know who Stephanie is and how she fits in the picture of the story.
Okay, beautiful. Added context.
Yes.
Okay, good. What did you like about the story?
I like the way the story opens, the very first sentence.
Okay, what is it?
When I first met my wife, it was June 1978. That opens up a whole world.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, because 1978 was this, the summer of love. And,
It literally was.
lots of groovy things going on. So that opens up a big panorama for me. I mean, the camera just spans back. It just opens up a whole new list, a world of potentialities.
Right. So I think that in hearing that, Walter would be, he'd know what he'd done well. Okay. Now let's take a look at the next bullet point here and point to one thing like that. Okay. Ask your learner, ask your partner, ask the writer one question to find out more about the story. And let's just imagine that we could ask Walter, let's say he's sitting with us, what would you like to ask Walter, having heard the story so far?
I'm dying to ask, why did it take 2 or 3 months before he saw her again?
Okay. Yeah.
I'd love to know.
Yeah. It's, you can speculate, like,
Yeah. Wonder what happened in between those 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
And then what happened then?
And, all
Yes.
right. Yeah, I'm curious too. What do you want to know from Walter?
I would want to know, how did he respond to Stephanie when he first locked his eyeballs on her? What were the feelings surging through his heart, mind, and body?
Wouldn't that be great? What I like to do is I like to make a sheet of paper very messy from the outset so that a learner knows that we're actually drafting and we don't write things perfectly the first time in general.
Right.
And so I might put a big word at the top of this page, which is questions. Boop. And then, would you repeat your question, Sandeep? What did you want to ask Walter?
I wanted to know, I was dying to know, why did it take 2 or 3 months before he saw her again?
Why did it take?
What happened during those 2 to 3 months?
She was probably getting rid of her first husband.
Before he saw her again. Okay, perfect. What was your question? If you repeat, I'm going to write it down here.
When he first looked at her.
When he first looked at her,
What were the feelings?
what were the feelings
In his heart,
in his
mind,
heart, mind, and body,
You're a romantic.
said the romantic lady. Okay, so what I've done here is I've made it kind of messy, and I've written one question here so that we can hand this to Walter and there will be space for him to answer the question. And there will be space for him to answer the question here. And that will set him up nicely for another revision and draft. If he decides he'd like to add more detail that you wanted to know more about. And it's always his work. And so maybe he'll say, yeah, I want to add that in. Or maybe you're like, no thanks. And either way is fine. Okay? So that's that phase. We've gone through this part of the strategy already. And this is the part of the strategy I would share this piece of paper and the strategy with Walter. Because if your learner's writing and you're writing, do you believe in love at first sight? Why or why not? And I'm like, yes, because blah, 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 blah. And you're writing your answer, yes, because. And then you're going to read your story to your learner. And your learner can practice pointing to your story to say what they liked and why they liked it, and thinking of a question, because maybe they've never been asked, what do you think about this text? Yeah. And what does it strike in your mind? Yeah. You know, so they're practicing, you're practicing, and they're getting used to, what do you like? What's a question? What do you like? What do you want to know more about? And that becomes a frame of reference for themselves as writers. Okay. What we've done is we've gone through the steps of this process together, in that, you know, we've read the story, we've pointed to what we've liked, we've asked a question to expand, to clarify, to expand the story. And this is what your learner is going to have as well. Share it with your learner, because they're going to be able to use this framework with their own writing and think about what they liked, what's good about it, why they liked it. And they might ask themselves questions to be able to expand their own story. So, you know, they won't need a tutor as much anymore. And now there's another step that I didn't put on this sheet, and it's specifically for the tutor. And I've put it up here on the board. It's make one suggestion based on a pattern of errors. And it's very carefully worded. I think that a lot of times we go back to our own experiences when we were learning to write things. And sometimes we had teachers who corrected our papers. And correcting a paper is very different from responding to writing. Okay? And we actually want to shift our focus to responding in a way that elicits more writing, that makes writing a more joyful experience, and that also, over time, gets at the mechanical aspects of writing, like grammar and spelling, and helps improve that. So what we need to do is we really need to play the detective all the time while we're tutoring. When your learner writes something, like Walter, you're always noticing, what is he doing well? And you're thinking, what is it that's getting in the way of his communication the most? What kind of errors come up again and again? So maybe every time you meet, you do a journal entry. Maybe you write in response to things that you've read. Maybe your learner writes things for work that you're working on, communication in the office or with family members, schooling, all the writing that happens. You're noticing if there's a pattern in the kinds of errors that your learners make. And this is I think this is one of the hardest things to learn how to do, because it takes a lot of practice, which is why we're here. So go ahead, let's take a look at Walter's writing. Mm-hmm. And you'll see that he wrote this over the course of quite a few sessions. Mm-hmm. And you'll also see, if you skip 2 pages, we actually got some of this on print. You know, we used a computer, and here's an arrow, and he added in ideas. Mm-hmm. And then there was a whole other draft that happened before it became the publishing draft. Okay. And I'd like for us to practice a little bit looking for a pattern of errors based on Walter's writing. Why don't we just take a look at page 1 of his work? And I would like for us to talk about what all the potential errors are that we could focus on with Walter. And we'll come up with one, and we'll narrow it down so that we have one focus of practice for improving his writing. So what kind of errors do you see right off the bat?
Well, I see many spelling errors.
Okay, what kind of spelling? Let's get specific.
When I first meet my wife,
Okay, instead of?
When I first met my wife.
Okay. What else is going on in here?
She sat
She's,
in the back seat instead of sit in the back seat.
Okay.
And
the
D, did you notice when he spells down, it's really a B?
B, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's the other way around.
My learner does that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's pretty common to do.
And she'll read these as those all the time.
Okay.
All the time.
So that's a pattern within your own tutoring. So what kind of mistake shows up not once, not twice, maybe 3 times, maybe 4 times? Do we see, see, this is where we get down to analyzing a piece of writing. And this happens away from tutoring because we're not poring over looking for all the mistakes we can find when we're sitting next to our learning partner.
Right.
So there's a tense issue
Tense,
going
yes,
on.
exactly.
Present tense, past tense.
Yes.
Okay.
Spelling.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you what. A lot of tutors want to know how much emphasis should I place on grammar when we're writing? And I think it's a pretty common question and an important question that tutors have. How much do you emphasize grammar? So I want to jump on an idea that came up, and we're going to talk about, one way to play with grammar, or I want to say to correct, to improve, to play with grammar, because I think that's all the same thing. Like learning is fun,
right.
And how do we make it fun? I'd like to write down a way that I might work on this and, gather your input to see if it makes sense. And also, I'm going to need you to supply the material. So let's get out another flip chart sheet. So now we're all standing, just so we can see the board well. And it's important to have Walter's piece of paper, his writing, right in front of us. And what I'm going to ask you to do, we've identified present and past tense as a consistent error. It's a pattern that shows up in it's a pattern of errors, and it's past and present. And so now we want to help Walter learn how to use the past tense and to add that to his repertoire over time, so that in the future, and it takes time, but after we've been working for months and months, we're going to start seeing the past tense get better and better because we're going to focus on it. So I'm going to show you something I like a lot. It's called a T-chart. And a T-chart is just like this, whoop and whoop. Okay. Voila, a T. And I like them because they're easy to make in tutoring, And also, it's a graphic organizer that can help us compare and contrast items very clearly. So on this side of the T-chart, I'm going to put now. This is the present tense. And on this side of the T-chart, I'm going to write 1978, and that's the past, okay? So when I'm working with a learner, I really don't add the jargon of present or past perfect or simple past. The reason is this. It's adding a whole level of language that really can be more confusing than helpful. Yes. And I'm just not someone who keeps that in my head. It's not my focus or specialty or cup of tea. But when you're focusing in on a grammatical type of error, one at a time, because you can only really focus on one thing at a time. That's the challenge of tutoring, isn't it?
Yeah.
Knowing what you're working on.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of folks who've written books about what you might want to know more about. And this is a great time to go to the literacy collection or talk to the literacy coordinator and say, I need some exercises that really help us focus on present and past tense. And then you go to that specific part of the book instead of doing page 1, 2, 3 through this grammar book that may not be relevant except when we get to this. So I'll show you what it is. Okay. So I'm going to do a different, I like to do different color coding stuff. Look at Walter's piece and give me one present past tense error. Tell me what he wrote, which shows up in the now column, and what it really ought to be. And we'll write that in the 1978 column.
It's the very first sentence.
Okay.
He writes, when I first meet my wife.
Okay, and he writes oops, I'm going to put this one in green. And what should it be?
Met.
How do you spell met?
E-T. M-E-T.
Okay.
When she sat bound,
Okay.
I look.
Look. So he wrote look. And what should it be?
Looked.
And how do you spell it?
L-O-O-K-E-D.
Right. Very nice. What's another one?
The next one is, again, when I look in the rear view mirror.
Okay, and it should be
Looked.
Okay. Are there any other present past tense?
In the second paragraph, the first sentence, he says, when I look in the rearview mirror, I notice that she look good.
Okay, so here's
Actually,
look
look.
here and looked. And did you say notice? And what should that be?
Noticed.
Okay, and how do you spell it?
N-O-T-I-C-E-D.
Okay. Are there any other present, past, now, 1978 kind of errors?
Would you say this one was, she was look
Yeah,
good?
that's when I said look. She was looking good.
Okay.
So,
Either it needs to say, she looked good. So either, he needs to take out the was,
Right.
or he needs to make it
Looking.
she was looking good.
Right. And, I think that what we're going to find out, and what you already know working with your own learners, is that all sorts of configurations of errors show up. We can point to so many mistakes on the page. And our challenge and what we need to do is really look very narrowly to one pattern to work on.
okay.
And so you're mentioning important, valid things to work on. And I'd
However-
like to leave it to one word here and one word there.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if you take a look at that first page, are there any other words that he wrote in the present tense that needs to be in the past tense?
Move.
Move, yeah.
Yeah, move.
Okay, and what should it be?
Moved.
Moved.
Okay, I'm going to make this an ED just so it matches. Okay. Okay. All right, I'm going to add one more,
Okay.
and it's called see and saw.
Ah.
Where is
Okay. What we have here is on this side of the T chart, we can compare it very closely with that side of the T chart. So he can see exactly what he's written in the present that really will be correct if he adds this for the past. And, you'll notice these are very common words, and so those tend to be uncommon in a pattern, because this is a nice ED. But these are just different, aren't they? So you're just going to have to think of ways to memorize and to know. And so here we've got green, like two E's, one E. Here's a seesaw, and this is my artwork at its best. And, here's the present, and here's the past. And so now we know what we're working on. We have material. It's relevant. It comes from our learners' writing. And we can also go to a grammar workbook, get good advice from a literacy coordinator, and really focus on a lot of past tense, present tense that will supplement the words that he's already provided if you want extra practice. Okay? What do you walk away with in terms of how much emphasis do you give grammar in writing?
I think it's important to point it out so they don't keep making that same mistake again. But I think it's also important not to harp on it, because then that would be very discouraging.
Okay.
And you
No
don't want
harping.
to just make the person not want to ever write again.
Okay.
So I think it needs to be a real balance between how much you have to focus on it, definitely.
Yeah.
But how much you focus on it, I think, is the key.
Okay. You know, in the course of our session, we really talked a lot about Walter. Do we believe in love at first sight? Interesting stuff. Looking in the rearview mirror and really wanting to know more. And then we really focused on one type of error out of many, right? Because there's a lot we could work on with Walter. And so the idea of being able to work on one thing at a time is really important, and to really emphasize the ideas, and you are a writer and we're part of this writing community. Yeah. And then we want it to get better over time. So we're going to focus in on one thing. And we're going to practice and practice and practice. Yeah. And we're going to take time to get it. Okay. And that's one thing we can check off the box. When months down the road, there are a lot more EDs showing up on the page. Good. Yeah. Do you have any questions or comments about what we've done today? Or do you have a feeling of how you might use some of this strategy of responding to writing?
Definitely, I will actually take the steps and make sure that I go through those steps. Okay. Because sometimes you become very comfortable with your learner, and you might start to do shortcuts, and you might not be as effective.
Okay.
I will definitely follow this, and I personally appreciate how to approach this situation, because I have questioned myself on how to do it, you know, and so you've helped me with that.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, the T-chart is such a good visual because they can even take it with them.
They can take it with them.
Yes.
Yeah. I love your seesaw.
Yeah. Thank you. So we're going to take a little side trip, and we're going to do a strategy that actually is a reading comprehension strategy called visualization. And what Sandeep said totally reminded me of this, because it's actually about creating a picture in your mind. It's actually a movie. And what we're going to do to create a really vivid movie is we're going to think about all of the senses, what we see, what we hear, what we smell, how it feels, any tastes involved. And we're going to add as much of that sense to the movie that we can, because it helps us, when we create that, it helps us remember what we read. And that can help us understand what we read better, because we have the memory to go back to different parts of the movie or the writing. So I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, and if you don't want to, it's okay. I like to do this when I read out loud, and you could listen to it with your eyes closed. And then after we read it this way, we'll talk about what we saw, or we can try and describe a little bit of the movie that we created. Okay. Should we give it a try?
Sure.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks for playing along. It's going to be fun. So go ahead and please close your eyes and make this movie. When I first met my wife, it was June 1978. It was hot. I was with my sister that day because she called me on the phone to take her to the store. Stephanie was visiting my sister because my sister was married to Stephanie's brother. She sat in the back seat of my car. When she sat down, I looked in the rearview mirror. I said to myself, she would be my wife. When I looked in the rearview mirror, I noticed that she was looking good. Then it was about 2 or 3 months before I saw her again. By Walter. Okay. So that's the story, and I wonder if you'd like to share what was going on in your mind? What's inside your movie? Any details? Do you have a description of what you saw, what you smelled, felt, heard, colors or shapes that came up?
No, hot was all I saw. 1978 and hot, that's it.
Okay, good, thank you. And how about you?
It took me I moved to this country in June 1980.
Okay.
So it took me to my own experience of, June, moving to California from England, it was hot.
Oh,
okay. And then when he said that he looked through the rearview mirror and looked at her, I like pearls, so I pictured her wearing a pearl necklace.
So there was a woman wearing pearls.
I pictured her wearing a pearl necklace.
Okay.
Oh.
And so, even though that wasn't in there, what was she wearing?
Yeah.
Right.
It just I added to it, I suppose.
Yeah.
So that was my visualization.
Yes.
Like when he said she looked good,
Yeah.
it was like,
Pearls.
what looks good to me
Yeah.
is pearls. So
Right.
I just added that she was, wearing a pearl necklace.
Wonderful.
Carrying that further with the year,
Yeah.
I was thinking of a 1978 car.
What did the car look like?
The car was red and it was a Dodge with a black top.
Okay. Was it a big car?
A
small
Dodge.
car? It's a big car.
It was a Dodge. Dodge is a medium-sized car,
It was
isn't
a
it?
medium car.
Yes, and it's a boy car, so it's so it's got the vroom vroom sound. you know.
There
Right.
will, in the 70s, there were still a lot of the big cars.
Yeah.
Cadillacs,
Yeah. So
the
this was a car.
Monte
Yeah. So
Carlos,
this
the
was
big
a
cars.
This was a hefty car with steel around it.
All right. So now we're getting into some beautiful details that when you leave the library today, maybe you'll be thinking of a red car and pearls. So it's fun to have a conversation about the story, and it's totally true that when we read anything, we're bringing our own framework and our own frame of reference. The meaning isn't on the page. It's really what's going on that we bring to it back and forth between that text.
You've just seen some tutors and a tutor trainer practice the responding to writing strategy by asking a writer to read their own work, pointing to something specific you like about the writing, and saying why you like it, asking a question to find out more or to clarify something, making one suggestion based on a pattern of errors. Selecting one specific kind of error from your learner's writing to practice is an effective way to ensure that you and your learner focus on what makes the biggest difference in improving their writing. Responding to writing in this way encourages learners to write more with confidence and helps them improve their writing over time.